This car was picked up at a salvage auction. It's supposed to be a donor car to take all the parts, the engine, the transmission, the interior, and put those into a Gen 1 Camaro. Well, here's the problem. The car's kind of unique. I kind of like it.
Not gonna lie, this car's a hoot. Like, I don't know.
And it turns out that the repairs really aren't that terribly difficult. Couple that with the fact that I'm at least several months away from being ready for the drivetrain in the Gen 1, and it leads me to the decision that I need to make this one run. So I'm piecing it back together. I've got a quarter panel now and it's pretty well ready to weld on. I've got some body panel adhesive from 3M to tie the wheel housing and the fender section together. Plan today is to clean up this edge on both pieces, do a little bit of trial test fitting, which I've done, but I'm going to do it again today just to make sure we're in good shape. Oh, wow. Find a way to clamp everything together where it needs to be with a little adhesive in place and weld this thing together. Of course, 3M was like 50 bucks for the tool to run this glue. So I went down on the 3D printer and created my own little adapter to go into a caulk gun. We'll see if that works. This car's really made me think about what I want. The Gen 1 Camaro is fun. The idea of building one is really appealing. Frankly, I can't decide if the idea of having one is all that appealing. Compared to this car, where you get a pretty healthy blend of fun and practicality, it really has me questioning my end game. What's the plan? I don't know. The seam is all welded up. In an ideal world, the seam would be put together in such a way that this would just be simply bare metal all the way across the top. But let's be honest with ourselves here. I am not an ideal welder, nor am I an ideal body technician. The weld is sealed. I covered every hole. It took probably 4 or 5 passes with the welder. The first one gets it pretty well, then you come through and grind it. That reveals some pinholes. You go through and fill the pinholes, you grind it. That reveals some you just keep working your way through until eventually you've got all those holes covered, so it's solid metal. I used some fiberglass reinforced body filler to do a pass across the top and a little bit right here where the joint hits the door. I'm happy now with the shape that I've got right here in general, and it is actually, may I say, surprisingly good. A lot of work, but surprisingly good. And I've reached a point now where I need to do some sanding here, and I need to do some glaze coats. Now the glaze coat will go across the top here on the seam. We'll do a little bit here on this section. And then there are plenty of imperfections in the new panel that need a little bit of filling as well. Right here along the fender line and right here. Anyway, a couple places through here need some glaze coating. So that's where we are. From there, we should be able to sand this thing down, prime it, and hit it with the block sander. But before we can do any of that, we have to mask. Anything we don't want covered in primer has to be covered with some kind of masking. So we'll get some plastic sheeting, throw that over the top of the car, tape around the areas that need to be primed, and then anything we need to just protect needs to be covered. So a garbage bag over the rear tire generally works pretty well, and big sheets of plastic over the top of the car. The other thing with primer is it's extremely thick, so you don't get a whole lot of the airborne agents and overspray that you have to deal with when you're doing paint. So I'm not terribly concerned about shop cleanliness at this point. If it's got dust nibs, it doesn't matter. We're going to sand all this out anyway. Well, not bad. I'm happy with how that turned out. It'll need some sanding. It always does. That's what primer's for. But it's pretty clean. And frankly, the car almost doesn't look like itself anymore. It looks like a different car. I don't hate the look of the primer. In fact, the The primer's kind of nice. It hides all of the little imperfections. And when you hit it with the gloss, the imperfections stand out like a sore thumb. So sanding down the primer will be key before we get to the paint. Well, I think we're ready to go after this bad boy. I've got the door sanded down, the mirror and the handle have been removed. Everything is taped off. And I think I'm set up to where I can do some blending. This is tricky here because it's small. I might have to try a smaller paint gun. I don't know yet. The rest of it, this is pretty straightforward. I'm not worried about the door. Quarter panel, all this should be fine. This blending area is new to me. So the goal is to run sealer up to about the edge, paint up another inch or two, and clear coat up another inch or two beyond that, so that my blend happens right here where the paper ends. The idea behind having some coverage is to avoid overspray going up high, but still allowing for paint where it's needed. Oh, look, I have a visitor. Yeah, buddy, you're gonna have to go away. So, order of operations. First, I'll hit it with at least one, probably two, and up to 3 coats of sealer. The sealer not only helps ensure coverage and consistency in the paint color, but it is better at concealing scratches. I don't know exactly on this sealer, but the other sealers I've used will cover paint scratches of up to 400 grit, whereas paint just exaggerates paint scratches of 400 grit. In this case, I've sanded the car down to 600, and I think I've got it to where it's 600 grit scratches only, but it's possible that there are some deeper ones left behind. Can be difficult to tell sometimes. So at this point, we're going to hit it with a final wipe to make sure that there's no grease or oils, no dust. Not bad. Got the blending work to do in here. That's more high grit sandpaper and buffing than anything. And some basic assembly to do. But all things considered, this went really well. It's the first time I've done something like this. I've always painted an entire car. So the blending had me nervous, and it went, I think, quite well. We'll see after it gets cleaned up. It's hard to know for sure right now because the car's kind of dirty. In fact, it's very dirty. But the paint is great. And I say great, I always shoot for a 10, and then I'm happy for a 9. So I think I've got about a 9. It's got some obvious flaws. But you know what? Those flaws might make it fit in better with the existing paint because the existing paint is far from perfect. I've got the bumper left to paint. And then I think I'm done.